Hey everyone, welcome back to Lippy Studio, and today I'm here for a book slash movie talk of It Ends With Us. This is by Colleen Hoover. It came out in 2016. It is probably, I'm pretty sure it's her number one best-selling book. Um, and it recently turned into a movie starring Blake Lively, and this just came out a couple weeks ago. So here's a little summary of the book, because I'm going to talk a bit about the book, talk a bit about the movie, kind of go back and forth, talk a little bit about It Starts With Us, which is the sequel, but that's not really the point of this video. Is mostly to talk about the It Ends With Us, the first book. So it says Lily hasn't always had it easy, but that's never stopped her from working hard for the life she wants. She's come a long way from the small town where she grew up. She graduated from college, moved to Boston, started her own business. And when she feels a spark with a gorgeous neurosurgeon named Ryle Kincaid, everything in Lily's life seems too good to be true. Ryle is assertive, stubborn, maybe even a little arrogant. He's also sensitive, brilliant, and has a total soft spot for Lily, and the way he looks in scrubs certainly doesn't hurt. Lily can't get him out of her head, but Ryle's complete aversion to relationships is disturbing. Even as Lily finds herself becoming the exception to his no dating rule, she can't help but wonder what made him that way in the first place. As questions about her new relationship overwhelm her, so do thoughts of Atlas Corrigan, her first love and a link to the past she left behind. He was her kindred spirit, her protector. When Atlas suddenly reappears, everything Lily has built with Ryle is threatened. Yeah, it almost sounds like a love triangle, doesn't it? And it does have a love triangle aspect into it, but the overall thing is that spoiler if you have no idea what this book or the movie is, and there will be spoilers in this, just so everyone knows, this is a book about domestic violence. And Lily grew up with abusive parents. Her father abused her mom. I guess the parents didn't abuse her. I mean, maybe emotional abuse inflicted on her, but no, her father abused her mother. And in fact, this is based on a true story from Colleen Hoover's family, which makes it, I think, very impactful. But basically, um, she Lily ends up going through the same thing that her mom did because Ryle starts to become abusive towards her, um, and it's just kind of repeating the same cycle. And how she never wanted this to happen to her. She always swore to herself she would never get into an abusive relationship, and then she does. And again, that's the main thing, especially about the second half of the book, is her grappling with the fact that how did she get here? Because for a good chunk of the book, she is so happy in this relationship with Ryle, and really, if you take out the flashbacks, it really seems like a love story between her and Ryle. But no, this is a very complex book because there's so many storylines all connected to the central theme of domestic violence. And yeah, another one of those is her past with Atlas. And they were pretty much teenage lovers. They did not have a conventional relationship because they had to hide from her parents. But they kind of bonded over a similar past. They went through similar things, child neglect, all of that. And they had a really beautiful relationship that ended tragically with her dad beating Atlas up. And then she never saw him again until we see him present day when she sees him again. But you kind of have these parallel love stories. You have Lily starting, this thing with Atlas, or not Atlas, with Ryle, something new, and then her past with Atlas, and the beautiful connection that they had that ended so tragically. Now, in a way, this is kind of the same thing with Ryle. The thing was such like a beautiful love story was the whole point of it, and then it ends so tragically with everything that he does to her. Now, granted, the whole Lily and Atlas thing was out of their control. They could not have helped what her dad did to him. But the Ryle thing was a choice he made, and he chose to handle his anger this way. Now, granted, I think he had a right to be upset. However, instead of talking to her or asking her, okay, do you feel this way about Atlas? Like, instead of doing that, um, or taking a mature route about it, especially because they were married at this point, he chose to be physically abusive, and that is not okay. And I'm speaking as someone who has not been in the situation. I've known people who have, and it is hard. And what I'm here to tell you is that there's nothing excuses this behavior at all. not jealousy, not or really jealousy is the big thing. Ryle is jealous, and sure he has anger issues too. That's part of it, but he's jealous because he feels like it seems like he is overshadowing Lily in a way. He's becoming her parent in quotations. Like he is keeping her caged up to himself, and that's like emotional abuse, if you want to call it that. And he's just being very trapping of her throughout all of this, and none of that excuses what he does. And Alyssa says to her, none of this is your fault, and none of this is her fault. I feel so bad for her throughout all of this because she has this bad history with her parents. She just wanted to find something new with this guy who seems so nice at first. She has this tragic love story with her ex Atlas, and then her husband starts to become abusive. And meanwhile, she thinks she's in the wrong because she thinks um, she's in the wrong because of the Atlas situation. But really, she did nothing wrong. She was pretty much innocent in this entire situation. And that's what makes it so hard to watch, is because Ryle is set on blaming her for this Atlas thing. And you almost start to think, oh, should she, like, does she really love Atlas? And I think she does start to love him again. But granted, she fell out of love with Ryle because of the way he's been treating her. So no, I think it was perfectly understandable why she started having those feelings again. And I think she ran to him out of a place of comfort because she knew he could help her. And she did not feel comfortable with Ryle, obviously. I do think Atlas writing that article, or being in that article about the restaurant and his connection to Lily, was an interesting choice. I don't think that would have helped matters any. And in fact, I think that's kind of inappropriate to say about someone who's married. Um, but very minor in the grand scheme of things, because even that doesn't excuse what Ryle did to her. And again, the correct thing to do in this scenario, he's allowed to be upset. I would be upset at that too if a guy wrote that something about that about his ex, aka my wife. Like, I would be upset at that. I would talk to my wife. I would try to understand the situation. We would talk about it. We would act mature. Um, Not handle it in that way. And it's very sad. It's sad that that's the way he reacted. It's sad because love triangles happen. This is not a traditional love triangle. You have the classic fight between Ryle and Atlas in the restaurant, but really this is all about Lily finding herself in the same cycle that her parents were in and getting out of it, and not even just running to Atlas again, like getting out of this one thing, moving on to Atlas. It's really about herself. And then, later on, it shows her reconnecting with Atlas, but it's not like a really quick turnaround. He's not like a rebound for her. No, this is about the main character. And she's such a good main character. I'm not going to lie. She is really good because you could really root for her and feel bad for her. And very well written, in my opinion. So they had a great storyline overall. Um, Basically, though, the movie itself follows the book for the most part, but there are a couple of things. First of all, they age the characters up, and I read somewhere that Colleen Hoover did this because she thought it would be unrealistic for Ryle to be a full-on neurosurgeon in his 20s. That was the main reason, which I guess makes sense. To me personally, though, I do think it was kind of odd seeing characters in their mid 30s when I just assumed they would be early 20s. Now, I do think Ryle is more like late 20s, but you could definitely tell like Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni were older, and it was definitely a bit off-putting to me. I would say that Brandon Skelmer, who plays Atlas, looked the youngest, and he could easily pass for late 20s in my opinion. He looked very good. But no, it was definitely interesting. The age of it all. I also think that they did an incredible job casting the young Lily, made her look exactly like Blake Lively. That was really good. I thought that was a great casting choice. The flashbacks were pretty good too. Like, they were exactly how I pictured Lily and Atlas, like young Lily and Atlas, of course. Like they did a really good job with those scenes, just the awkwardness, but then turning into a real love story. I like those flashbacks a lot. Um, and and I like how they paralleled a bad love story with a good love story, but both are not black and white. Because you had Lily and she has such a good thing with Ryle at the beginning, but it turns bad, and then you have Atlas, and they had such a good, like such a beautiful connection that ended badly as well. But the difference is that she gets a second chance with Atlas because Atlas never did anything to her. All he did was protect her, be supportive of her, help her through things with her parents. Just shows obviously that her and Atlas are the true love story of this whole thing. But really, Lily getting like doing that for herself is the overall theme of this whole storyline. Um, but no, I thought it was interesting just because, like, to me, like the scenes where like they were all going out and having fun gave me like a more like young adult vibe rather than a mid 30s vibe. But that's just me. Especially, I thought Alyssa seemed older than I originally thought. Like you could tell she was probably like 40, and Ryle especially looked like he was 40, and Blake Lively close to there. Definitely, Atlas felt seemed the most young to me. Um, but no, the movie did a great job, like of taking the story from the book, the flashbacks, the love story, building it up, and then when the abuse comes, that's when things turn interesting, because in the book it's very explicit that Ryle is abusing her, but she chooses to believe the best in him because she loves him and she believes that they're different from her parents. The movie takes a different route by making it seem it was an accident. The scene where the oven scene, that is staged completely like an accident until later on, of course. Even the scene where he pushes her down the stairs, it almost seems like she just fell back, and and then we see later on that, of course, he pushed her. But no, it was very interesting how they staged those scenes to make it seem like she was a bit delusional. I don't know. That was interesting to me. Interesting choice. And I read something somewhere. They spent too much time on her falling in love and not enough time on her leaving the relationship. I think there's so much truth to that. They could have done a way better job with the pacing of this whole thing and having um, her spend more time reflecting on what's going on with the abuse rather than spending more time of her falling in love. And I think everyone should have known going into this movie what the theme was. But it was a bit jarring how it went from like a complete love story to the abuse. I think they should have paced it a bit better, in my opinion. I also thought their engagement and marriage seemed kind of rushed too. Um, but that's just me. And I also think in the movie, it to me the abuse situation just felt too quick. Like, and I think their whole relationship, like once they got engaged, everything felt rushed after. But because they spent a lot of time of them in the dating stage, I think they should have spent less time there and more time with the dealing with the abuse. Um, and the main reason is because I think that deserved more time because of how important that was, and and for some reason they didn't give it enough time that it deserved in the movie. Now in the book they do a good job because we get to hear exactly what she's feeling, um, throughout all of this and how she's feeling about the abuse and the fact that she still loves him, but she knows that she can't stay in this relationship anymore. And in the movie we just don't get that as much. And granted it's a pacing issue, but again they spent so much time on those scenes with her and Ryle, like the sex scenes and all of that, that they could have maybe cut some of that back to give the ending stuff and the emotional turmoil more time to breathe. That's just me though. That was a gripe I had, and how it all felt really rushed to that ending scene where she gave birth. Because in the book and the movie, that's such a good scene where she says, when if your daughter came to you and said her husband was hurting her, what would you say to her? And she says, I would tell her to leave him. And in that moment, it clicks with him. They're done, and she asks him for a divorce. And it's a really well done scene in both the book and the movie. But in the book, it seemed like she had more time, and we really got to see her come to that realization and that decision. In the movie, it just felt kind of, I don't know, like we saw that name tag with her with the Lily Bloom, and that indicated she was done. And even the scene where like she felt the heartbeat of the baby, that to me that showed indication she didn't want to do it on her own, but she knows she had to. But I think because the abuse stuff happened so fast and so like next to each other and all of that, it made it a bit jarring to me, and it felt like in a matter of weeks after they got married, like all this happened and she wanted a divorce. And I know that wasn't what happened, but I think if they had positioned things differently, they could have again spent more time with her wrestling with this decision to leave him. Just me though. I'll be curious to see what you guys think. Um, but one thing is if it does feel like we get a lot more of Atlas young than Atlas old. And that's something that why she wrote It Starts With Us, which it starts with us. The only really thing I'm going to say about it is that it's good. I'm glad they got their happy ending. It just wasn't as good as the first book, and that's just because it was just a bit boring, and not in a bad way. It didn't have the gripping storytelling that this book had, and it just felt a bit like lackluster to me. But I'm super happy that they got their happy ending, and yeah. So that's all I'm going to say about It Starts With Us. But because again, Atlas just doesn't have a whole lot of screen time, especially older Atlas, and in the story in both the book and the movie. So to see him get a storyline, like a real storyline, in the sequel is really nice. But I'm trying to think what else to talk about. I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this because obviously we have such a controversial topic here and such a realistic issue that so many people go through, and it's so sad. And the whole generational abuse is something that does happen in real life, and it saddens me to no end. And how again, no one deserves to be treated like this. Nobody, for no reason at all. Nothing warrants that type of behavior. If let me tell you, if you are upset about something, if you find it something about like you find out, I don't know, your wife has a phone number of her ex in her phone, basically that situation, talk to her about it. Let her explain. You are married after all. You have a commitment to each other. Do not rush to violence. That is never the answer. And I'm saying that as a Christian, violence is never the answer. So just don't do it. Um, and yeah, it's very hard. It was very hard to see it, but I think the actors in the movie did such a great job with portraying it. Even if it felt a bit rushed, it was still really well done. And Blake Lively was so good in this movie. I loved her, and even like really all the actors were really good in the movie. That might have been the highlight, like because I think there was some atrocious costuming. I'm sorry, awful, but the acting was so good between every single character, even Ryle, like the actor who played him, did a great job. Like a lot of these characters were exactly like how I pictured them in the books. Great casting choices. Um, and I saw there's a lot of controversy and drama out there with Blake Lively and Justin and all of that I'm not going to get into. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this was such a good movie. Now, here's what I'm telling you: this is a very hard movie to watch. You're going to think for a good chunk of the time. Now, granted, you're not going to know after you hear this, but you're going to think that's a love story because of how they're positioning it. And then Atlas is going to reappear, and then she's going to have to make a choice. Well, that is kind of it, but you add the whole domestic violence thing into it, it makes it so much more layered and so much more hard to read. But like, I think it needed that because otherwise it would just be a love story book, and those are so like repetitive and overdone that even though it's so hard, such a hard thing, the DV of it all, that's what this book needed to really make it special and to make it stand out. And if it didn't have that, it wouldn't have been as good. Just my opinion. Because I think it makes the overall story so well done. All these aspects into it, the her flashbacks with Atlas, that love story, her relationship with her parents, the struggles there, her present relationship with Ryle, the reappearance of Atlas in her life, all add up to a really good storyline, and not just a classic love triangle, no, a genuinely good story about getting out of her domestic violence relationship and breaking the generational abuse cycle. Really well done. Really good story. I highly recommend people to read this book. It is that good. And watch the movie. The movie is really good too. Now, granted, this isn't A Witch is Better, but I do prefer the book. And that's just because we get to hear more about what Lily is thinking. And that really helps when she's struggling with whether to leave him or not. Like you need to know what's going through her mind. And it was harder to get that with the movie. And granted, it's hard. It's a movie. They can't do a lot of inner monologue. But the pacing in the movie was its biggest struggle to me. Just me though. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Comment down below your thoughts on this story, the book and the movie. Which one do you like better? What do you like about it? What do you dislike? So yeah, I will see you guys soon with another video. Thanks everyone for listening, and bye everyone.